Welcome back to Finding Our People. We started last week and we talked about assessing the needs that we have. And that's super important. If you have not done that, go back and do that. It's super, super important because if we don't know our needs, how are we going to know when we have the right people, right? So we've got to make sure we take the time to assess our needs, and God will speak to us through that about what are our most important priorities and so many different things. Okay. So today we're going to move on. So go back if you haven't watched that. Today we're going to move on and we're going to talk about the next step. We're going to talk about onboarding people. We're going to talk about just finding the people, all of those things. So to do that and to actually get the people to buy in and actually commit and really commit to what you're doing, we need to be super clear about our vision and mission. And we need to make sure we're sharing that well, so people understand it. They know where we're at, they know where we're going to, and they can really buy into this idea of whatever it is the world needs that you are providing. And we need to be clear about that. Before we ask for our wants, maybe I need a graphic designer, or I need, a social media person, or I need, whatever. Before I put out there what I need, I want to share what they're working for. Because it's not me that they're working for. They're working for God, and they're working for this bigger vision and mission. So we need to be very clear and be able to outline that in a couple sentences. And then we ask for what we need as far as the specifics of the volunteering. All right. So make sure you are super clear on that. What is it you're doing? How is it you're doing that? And that is important in so many other ways, not just for volunteers. It's also donors. It's also, staff, every person. The clarity of your vision and mission is imperative. So take the time. Get it out, written, not in your head, written. Get feedback from your close inner circle. If you're in the Christian Rocketeers, get our feedback. Let's get that really tight and really focused so we know our bigger goal and also what is our next right step. And we want both of those things outlined for the people that we're looking to work with us. That gives them that drive. It gives them that passion. It gives them something that they're working towards. Super important. Number two, as you are onboarding, as you're getting your people and they're starting to come, is getting them into the right roles. I might have talked about this a little bit last week, but the idea of that we don't jump in to a massive role. Like if you have a huge year-end mailing that you're doing and you need a graphics art project done like within the week to get it to the printer, to get it mailed, to get it ready to go out and do your thing. Like that's an important project. We don't give that to a new volunteer. Not in that time frame. If you're working with her in May or him in May and you've got 6 months to pull that off, and if they don't come through, then you can have a backup plan, that's fine. But we don't jump in if you are in an emergent need. We don't jump new volunteers into emergent needs because we don't know if they're going to follow through. Even with staff, you don't know if they're going to follow through, and they need to get to know you. They need to get to know the mission. They need to get to know so much. And so it's unfair on our end to be doing that. And it puts up unrealistic expectations. And it's very tempting. And in fact, I did it this summer. There was a way that I was moving forward, not in that specific example, but in another example. And so it's very, very tempting, especially when you have a role that you need filled. But we need to take our time. So put them into smaller roles, let them show their faithfulness, let them get to know you, let them get to know the vision and the mission more, and then lead them up to more important roles and more critical roles as they show their faithfulness. Okay? So don't think that they're a magic wand and a magic key, to all this. Volunteers are not that at the beginning. They will be as they grow with you. So be patient, but they're not going to be that at the beginning. They need to get to know you. They need to get to know the vision. They need to get to know the mission. They need to get to know things. And it's not fair on our end to put those high level of expectations and time crunches on them. Okay? So be clear. Take your time. Number one, know your vision and mission and be able to communicate that well. Number two, take your time. Don't throw them into big roles too soon. Let them get to know you. Um, and then I wanted to share a little bit about Nehemiah and the way that he puts people in roles. So as they get to know you, as you get to know them, you're going to get to know them more, and you're going to want to spend time getting to know them. Don't think they're just there to dump off projects on. Get to know them. What do they really like? What do they not like? Because they might have responded to an ad from volunteermatch.org, but they really don't have any skills in that area. They really loved your vision and mission, but they really don't know how to edit videos. And that's what the ad that they responded to was, right? So you need to take the time to get to know them a little bit. It doesn't need to be a long, hour-long conversation. It can be 5 minutes. It can be 2 minutes. It can be emails back and forth. But what are their likes? What are their dislikes? What is their key area? Where do they just love to work? Like, they love doing website redesign, but they have no idea how to do video editing. Whatever that is, you're going to want to get to know them. There's some ways that you can do. They can do spiritual gift tests. They can do disc profiles. If you're in Christian Rocketeers, you have access to all of those, the links to those things. You can find them online too. Just getting to know them and asking them questions and then putting them in a role. Don't create a role. If you don't need a website and that's what they're good at, you don't create a role for them, which I am guilty of. We need to make sure that they are in a role, though, that is something we need, that the organization needs, and that they have kind of that genius zone. Like, this is where they really thrive and do really well. And if they don't, find another place that you need that they do, or wait for the next person in that area. All right. And Nehemiah, if you just read the book of Nehemiah, it is just so inspiring. Like, he had attack from all areas. He had a lot of things going on. He was rebuilding the walls. He didn't know Jerusalem. He didn't know how to do building projects. He just didn't know a lot of things. He didn't know anything about any of this. And yet, with the Holy Spirit, with God's power, with God's leading and guidance, with prayer, he was able to, get these people mobilized, build the wall in 52 days. And I believe it was like 30 years, 15 years. It was a lot of years, 15 to 30 years that those walls were not built. 15 to 30 years. And the guy got it done in 52 days. All right. That should give you peace when you're trying to work on a project. It should give you clarity. One of the things that I learned along the way is that sometimes when a volunteer doesn't come for a specific project, it's because that project isn't truly meant to be done. Because if it was, God would bring the person in the right timing to get that project done. And so then I wait, or I wait for the next year. I amend it. I figure out whatever it is. It goes into prayer. It doesn't go into figuring it out as far as like, oh, let me figure out how to graphically design this. I have no skills in that area. But it's like, okay, God, that's not going to work. I can't do that. You didn't give me the person to do it. So what do you want me to do? So it just pushes me further into prayer and sometimes preparation. The idea of next year, let me start, in May, get ready for my year-end mailing. So then I can work up a volunteer, to that level in that time. So it's a little bit of preparation, and it's a lot of prayer, and it's accepting, what God gives and what God doesn't give, and know that He's got it under control. That's a whole nother topic that I won't get into on this live, but really go in and read Nehemiah, see how he was attacked on the inside and the outside. The Jews came against him, the government officials from the places around Jerusalem came against him. His internal thoughts were against him. He doesn't share that in the book, but he doesn't have any experience in any of this. He had to be struggling internally. And what did he rely on? He relied on prayer. So prayer. And get into Nehemiah and read that. Be willing to shift roles when needed. So, like I shared earlier, the idea of like, if she came to you through Volunteer Match and it was like a video editing post and it's just not working, don't necessarily give up on the person, especially if they're a reliable person. Say, okay, this isn't really, working out, but I want to know, like, where is your genius zone? Like, what do you love to work on? What's easy? What's simple? What do you just like? Oh, I love this, whatever this is. And then see if you have that need. If you don't, again, don't create a role for it, but make sure that you're willing to move people as they need to be moved. All right. It's really the character that you're really wanting to pour into, and you're wanting to figure out, are they willing to do things? Are they willing to do it on time? And what does that look like? And part of that goes to the next point. So number one was our vision and mission, making sure we're clear and it's clear and it's clear in the clarity of your vision and mission. Number two, it's taking your time. Don't rush people into an important role. We've got to take our time and onboard people really well. We're going to talk a little bit more about onboarding in a second. So start with small projects and work them up to larger projects. And then really get to know your people, right? What are their gifts? Where are those areas? Okay. And getting to know them, taking the time to get to know them. Spiritual gifts inventories, if they stay long enough, around long enough, and just getting to know their sweet spots. Be willing to shift roles. So if they come to you in a certain role and it's just not working out, maybe they can help you in a different area. Like ask, be willing to get out there and ask. Right? That's the big thing with volunteers. We're afraid of trust, which we talked about last week, and we're afraid of asking. And are we asking too much? Ask. They can say no. Give them that space to say no. Make sure your wording is such that it's not like, oh, I'm desperate, I really need your help. And then they feel like they can't say no, as opposed to like, hey, I've got this project, I'm really hoping to do it in this time frame. Does that work with your schedule? Check in with them. And that kind of goes to the next point. So maybe that's 5, I think. Your communication. We think our communication is clear. Like in our head, it's like, oh, this is not what I need. But it's not always clear from the outside. Shawnee and I were talking about this week, actually. That idea of think about where they're sitting. You know where you're sitting, and you need this project done, for year end, and it needs to be done in this time frame, and this is what goes into it. And, you've got all this back knowledge. They're new to you. And even if they're not, sometimes, like our communication may be assuming they're in the same headspace that we are. And the reality is, especially for new volunteers, is they are nowhere near that headspace. We've got to take way step back and say, okay, where is she? She's new. Where's he? Where is this volunteer, right? He's way back here. So I need to say, okay, this is what we need to do. This is why we need to do it. This is what we hope to gain from this. And this is the logistics of how we walk that out and what I need your help in that. So making sure our communication is clear. Going back to where they are, take a breath and say, okay, where is this person? What does this person need to know to get what we need done? And so you might need to start with, okay, what do we need done? What do I want from this person? And then say, where are they in the knowledge base? And then walk them up to that point. And that might be through talking, it might be through an interaction, or it could be an email, whatever that might look like for you. Whatever way you best communicate, whatever way your volunteer best communicates is even better. And I would always follow up, if you do a recording, that's great, but then send her a copy of the recording. You can go to Otter AI and get a copy, like a transcript, and then you can tighten that up and say, okay, here's the bullet points. So there's a lot of different ways that can be done, that you can become a better communicator. But always, when you're not getting the results you want, assume it's your communication first, because it usually is. There's ways that volunteers disappoint as well. But if we're not communicating, people are getting frustrated. If we're not communicating clearly, it's very, very difficult. So always assume that you were wrong. If the project isn't going well, go back, look at your emails, go back and look at where have you not brought them, from way back here to where they need to be able to actually effectuate the project that you're asking them to do. All right. And then going back to, so let me recap. Number 1, your why, being very clear about your why. What is your vision and mission, and being able to communicate that clearly. And that's where we start to get volunteers. Number 2, take your time. Don't throw them into important roles early on in the process. Let them earn their way up there. Let your communication get them to that point. Number 3, study Nehemiah. Study Nehemiah. I'm not going to go into that again. Making sure you're putting them in their areas of strength and working with them on figuring that out. It's about their relationship with Christ more than it is about their project that they are doing for you, even if they're not Christian. Like your communication should be about bringing them closer to Christ. Being willing to shift roles, always assuming that your communication is the problem, not them. Onboarding. So onboarding, this probably should have went a little earlier, but the onboarding is the idea of write out, what are your goals for the project? What are your timeframes? What is your time frame on the project? Why, how does this fit into the bigger picture of this vision and mission? So they realize how important this is. And then that gets them to work harder. It works them to get faster. It just gets them to really buy into what you're doing. Okay, so have that all written out. So you are clear, they are clear, everyone knows everything up front. And then you can easily follow up. If it's a longer term project, you can every week check in like, hey, where are we at on this project? So make sure that it is written out, like what their roles are. I just had a conversation, I guess it was an email communication or messaging communication with a client this week. And that idea of like social media. Social media is very general. Is it for specific campaigns? Is it for day-to-day communication? Like what exactly do you want? That goes back to last week of what are assessing our needs and what do we really, really want, right? And then as we have that, then we need to communicate that to our volunteers so they are clear and also how that fits into the bigger picture of the entire vision and mission that's being outlined. Thanking them all the time is another huge key, and communicating. Sometimes we get, I don't know if the word is afraid, whatever the word is, that we don't communicate well or often. We're like, oh, we're bugging them or oh, this or oh, that. Like, if they've committed to a project, following up weekly is not too much communication, especially if it's a longer term project. Don't expect, the week before to email out and say, oh, hey, is the project done? Like you need to be communicating with them through the process because things may come up. Life may come up from them and they may forget. People forget, you forget, I forget, people forget. And so we need to have that, sometimes that hand holding. And it's not a constant, but once a week or whatever, depending on the project itself, like, hey, how can I help? Is there anything you need from me? Just that reminder. I'm not letting things sit out there. All right. So that is week 2 on finding your people. So here we are talking about really the onboarding process and how to make this a successful journey for both you and your vision and mission and also your volunteer. So we want to make sure that it's an equal, not necessarily in time, but yet in investment as far as what people are getting out of it, both directions. So take some notes on that, start walking that out. Feel free to ask questions. We'll hop in here and answer any of those questions. Next week, we will be back live at noon Central Time. Next week, Wednesday, noon Central Time. So we'll be here live and we may even fair some questions. I'm going to see if we can do that or not. I'll have to ask Shawnee in the tech area. But otherwise, throw your questions here and be there next week and we can chat through anything else that you have. This will be the ending of our mini series on finding our people, because people are your greatest resource. We think provision is, we think money is, but people actually are a greater resource than the provision, and the provision will come as we have the people and as we have the things that we need in place. So it was great to be here with you guys today. I'm excited to see you guys next week. In the meantime, hop on over to ChristianRocketeers.com if you are starting up a nonprofit or you have further questions and you want to get more one-on-one help. We do coaching. We have course community and coaching. In fact, I'm getting off right now to hop onto our coaching call we have 2 coaching calls a month that we are one-on-one with your direct questions. And so I've got to go to hop over there, but hop over to ChristianRocketeers.com and hop on a free call and see if we are a good fit to work together. All right. We'll see you next week.